Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to the Minister and colleagues of the Ministry. Minister, I believe you know where I am going to begin this morning. I don't think it is any secret that I have a particularly strong position on the role and function of the National Sports Council, to the extent that it is the institution that carries with it a very serious responsibility for the development of sport, for the engagement of young people, for the maintenance of infrastructure, and therefore the community cohesion and the social capital that comes with all of those responsibilities. It is similarly no secret, I believe by now, that in St. Michael's South Central, my team and I have in the past 6 months undertaken our own refurbishment and reintroduction of programs to 2 pavilions. The pavilion at Gully Hill, Grosvenor Road, Carrington Village, and the pavilion at Valerie, which we are this weekend getting ready to complete. They have been undertaken with donated materials, 100%, and 100% of volunteer labor. And the reason we undertook that has to do with the challenges we had with the maintenance of those facilities by the National Sports Council. And I say that with full transparency because the officers sitting behind you, Minister, are well aware. You yourself, Minister, came with me in August of 2023 to examine the conditions of those centers. And in the months that elapsed since, between then and November of 2023, when we were forced to begin our own refurbishment, we got no traction. Minister, my question is as follows. Of the 19.4 million in the estimates as for the National Sports Council in your estimates this year, what part of that and with what execution plan is dedicated to the regular surveillance, because that's where you have to start, surveillance, maintenance, refurbishment of pavilions in Barbados? I know that we are very excited about mini stadia, but let me start where the beginning is. What part of that relates to the regular maintenance of those centers? What is the maintenance plan? What are the human resources, tradespeople, carpenters, masons, all the resources that you need that are available to the Sports Council with what regularity? What is the scope then for engaging artisans from the communities where these pavilions exist? That is what I'm asking, and I know, Minister, that you tend to use the word Center Management Committee quite easily. That's coming in my follow-up question. That's not what I'm asking you about now. I'm asking you specifically about the plan and the resources, the approach to execution of those pavilions in this coming financial year that you have this $19.4 million allocated to the Sports Council.
Thank you for the question, Minister. The truth is that we inherited a plant meaning all of our community centers, and in this case, the pavilions, that were in a state of disrepair. We have had to remove, for example, I'll come back to the communities, to the pavilions, we have had to remove several light poles at our grounds because of the fact that they were rusted at the base and were proven to be problematic in terms of safety. So we have changed out as many as possible. We took down all of those ones that were rusted out. The pavilions is another situation, Minister, where, like I said, we have started the process. There's a dedicated now, we have a fixed maintenance schedule that we are going from pavilion to do repairs that were, I don't know, in a state of disrepair for more than 20 years. So the truth is, monies are allocated. I will have the director of the Sports Council and Mr. Matthias speak to you in terms of plans that we're rolling out to ensure that all of these pavilions are fixed. I must tell you, I'm the Minister of Sports, and Gore Hill, there's some work that needs to be done at Gore Hill as well. So it is not a case that we are oblivious to the issues that are happening at the pavilions. I want to thank you because I have been preaching, whenever I speak to clubs and groups, I've been preaching self-help, and you are able to mobilize at your level to have your two communities repaired. But we are doing what is necessary to ensure that we have those pavilions fit for purpose on island. So I will ask the director and Mr. Matthias to come in and speak to you about some of the work that we're doing.
Thank you, Minister Neil Murrell, Director, National Sports Council. Thank you, Member MP Caddle, St. Michael South Central, for your question. The question we have to start with some history. And of the $13 million that we were given last year, there was a serious cut from our requested budget. Of the cut, we had a significant cut in maintenance because of the cuts that we were given last year. However, the National Sports Council still worked with many of the pavilions in terms of trying its best to repair them. We also worked, of course, with some of our partners, sponsored partners, and I'm happy to hear that Minister Caddle would have worked with some of her partners to ensure that the pavilion, the two pavilions she outlined, was fit for purpose. So we are challenged on one hand with a heavy cut in our maintenance budget, but at the same time, we still work assiduously to try to ensure that maintenance is still carried out on a fairly regular basis. What we have done over the last 2 months or so, 2 to 3 months or so, we have gone around to all of the 70 pavilions. We have looked at totality, the maintenance issues. We've put them in a database, and we will then prioritize the work in terms of the maintenance of the pavilion, and also work with some of our partners to ensure that the maintenance is carried out. In terms of the human resources at the council, again, we have been stymied very much with the cuts in the budget. We have had to use contract workers for a period of time to ensure that work is carried out. So our human resources is not, certainly not as much as they were in the past. And also in terms of the scope for using the artisans within the community, we see a lot of utility in doing that because it would ensure that persons in the community are given jobs in terms of the upkeep of the pavilion. So in summary though, we are working, we continue to work assiduously to ensure that maintenance is a priority. And we thank Minister Caddle for raising the question. Thank you.
Mr. Matthias, can you weigh in on this as well, please?
Good morning, everyone. Nicholas Matthias, Senior Superintendent of Works at the National Sports Council. Endorsing what Director Morrow would have said about utilizing as many of the resources that we had available. Resources still pose a bit of a issue at the Sports Council when it comes to our budget being cut based on requests. So we took a holistic approach 2 months ago where we assigned a supervisor to go out and comprehensively research and investigate the issues at all 70 pavilions. And coming out of that, he has generated a report where we will prioritize certain pavilions as we go along. But I must stress, as the director has said, it can only be done based on the resources we have available. And without those resources, monetary, human, we still will have to prioritize what we can. And as time goes on and resources come in, we will continue to go and get our repairs and maintenance done at these facilities. Outside of that, we still are dedicated to trying to keep the pavilions open to the public and actively so, and we will dedicate ourselves in this financial year to doing that as well.
Just by way of follow-up, if I may, I've had a look at your estimates for the current financial year ending the end of March, and I do not see any particular reduction to the maintenance, but we won't quibble over that matter at the moment. Where I do want to follow up is, I thank you for the reply, Minister and team, but I'm hearing a lot of adjectives, and it prevents me from having any clarity or specificity with respect to my question regarding a fixed maintenance schedule and fixed surveillance. Minister, you said in your reply that you've been preaching self-help, and I got a lot of congratulations from your staff in their reply about the extent to which, as the Member of Parliament, I had to hit the road to find resources to address issues that must be a matter of state. So I, with all due respect, don't revel in those congratulations. I thank the private sector entities and the tremendous input of the volunteer artisans. But they came in a situation where children in communities who wish to play sport and who wish to access their centers could not do so safely. In a situation where at the Valerie Pavilion, the repairs remain outstanding, notwithstanding having been submitted repeatedly. But beyond that, the question of the opening hours of the pavilions, and indeed the working hours of the staff who are paid to keep them open, must also attract the attention of the supervisory staff and the management of the Sports Council. I would like to hear from you. I mean, I don't know if you're minded to give some more specificity to a maintenance plan, because what I heard in the answer just now had none. But I would like to hear from you now about the extent to which we can expect to see posted on each pavilion what the opening hours should be, because that would go a long way to help people understand what they can expect and how they can expect to be served. Certainly, we intend, and when I say we, I mean the groups and communities that frankly had no choice but to mobilize in order to get their pavilions in working order. We are considering the idea of having a charter for the operation of our pavilions, I would like to suggest that the Sports Council may wish to do the same, to have a basic standard of service and agree a basic standard of service that our communities deserve. So I'd like to hear from you, Minister, the extent to which we can expect to see posted on each pavilion the opening hours, the extent to which we can expect to have, again, a plan that will be shared with the public on how opening will be managed. You have spoken in the past at length about center management committees, but having gone through the work of working with my communities to help them jointly identify people to sit on these center management committees, we are none the wiser as to how they will function and to what extent they will have resources and how they will go through their decision making. As I close the question, I will tell you this. It is not just a question of having those committees in place, but it is also a question of having some agreement to the mission within the Sports Council. We have seen scenarios where while we were doing the work ourselves to refurbish the pavilion, there were staff of the Sports Council that were coming there and dragging a hose through the pavilion and washing the van on the hard court. Staff who came and threw grease from rolling the lines on the pasta up against the wall that we had just painted. What is the charter that exists in the Sports Council then? What is the commitment to service that exists in the Sports Council then? And when can we expect to see that improved and renewed? Please.
Thank you for your questions, Minister. The reality is that staff is paid to be at those community centers for the regular working hours as most civil servants. I would now have to investigate to see what is possible in terms of staggering hours to have persons at the locations after 4:30. You mentioned the Center Management Committee, and I will go back there because that is one of the solutions to rectify the problem that you have mentioned. After 4:30, the Center Management Committees that will be put in place, drawn from members from within the locale of the particular pavilion, would be functioning in a way to provide training for those persons who wish to utilize the facilities. We fully understand that there will be a need for like bathroom facilities for changing and those type of activities. The ministry is undertaken we have started the community coaches program, and the community coaches program is to be rolled out at some of our same or all of our pavilions. The only way that we're going to make that possible or make that happen in the way that we expect it to is if those community centers that you have mentioned are problematic, have these center management committees in place. Now, I don't think that management of Sports Council can really be held responsible for a staff member who's at a location using the holes and all of that to wash down vehicles. Unless that information is fed to management, we would not be aware of that on a day-to-day basis. So I thank you for raising it. Obviously, we will shed some light in terms of how we treat now to managing the locations. But to answer your question, right now, it is a case where our staff work until 4:30. Unless those center management committees are put in place to come and function in a similar way to what we're doing with the community centers, then I really am not sure how I can answer your question in terms of facilitating the needs of those persons who would want to use the facilities after hours. It is the only solution unless, like I said, that we can find a way to stagger the working hours of the caretaker or the person who is responsible for the said location.
Thanks, Minister. Forgive me if, in my very deep feelings and concerns about this matter, I did not make my question clear. What I was trying to get clarity on was the mode of functioning of the center management committees at the pavilion. And I won't ask you to revisit it, but I'll tell you why I asked it before I move on to my second question. I asked it because the way that human beings feel and react is that we are asking people to volunteer their time and their commitment in circumstances where they may have cause to question the time and commitment of those who are paid to make efforts in this regard. So I will leave that with you to reflect on. But I will also say that the committees need very clear guidance on how they are to function, because here you have a volunteer group of people, committed though they may be, they are people from a community who just want to help. And so they can't tell you, they can't give you unless you give them very clear guidance and instructions. And to be quite frank, not necessarily financial resources, but some resources, at the very least, to know that when they call the Sports Council, somebody's gonna come and help them. But I move on to my second question that now has to do with the Community Development Department. Perhaps this question might be a bit pedestrian, but I ask you, Minister, to humor me. We have pavilions in my constituency. We do not have community centers. And so the pavilions are meant to be managed by the National Sports Council. I understand that you have a kind of a division of labor where you have community centers, those are managed by the Community Development Department. But it seems to me that community development still needs to happen in communities that don't have community centers. And so there was a time, 2018, 2019, when I had a clear sense of who the community development officers were that worked in a particular area. I am not sure if that has changed. I am also not sure of the community development program for the communities that I have the privilege to represent. So I would just like an explanation, please, about how does the community development department make itself felt and go about the business of investing in community development in cases where they do not have community centers in those locations?
All right, thank you, Minister. First, let me just go back because you mentioned volunteer. I coach 3 basketball teams in St. John, including a female team at the point in time. None of the coaches that coach on island, as far as I know, are paid to coach the teams that they're charged with. So volunteering at community level is nothing new. It has been there from time immemorial, and I think it will continue. So in relation to having persons work with the center management committees, yes, the Sports Council will provide a detailed document in terms of the terms, the TOR for those particular center management committees, where the Ministry of Sports, so in terms of resources, if there's a need to have balls or cones or whatever, that is something that can be facilitated through the ministry. But you asked about community development. In my area, my community center is currently under repairs, and we meaning community development, had to stage a training program at the Gore Hill Pavilion. As you know, Minister, every single ministry, we're pouring from the same governmental cup. So to construct community centers at every location is not something that can happen all at once. But community development are actively engaged in running programs at different locations to benefit those persons who we deem to be the target population. Community development focus a little more over the age of 18 than the mainstream ministry. But I will allow Ms. Keat to come in and share with you some of the programs that are happening through the community development. And in some cases, if there are no community centers, we are prepared to use buildings that are available, i.e. school, churches that are close to the area. Ms. Skeet?
A very pleasant good morning to everyone. Well, in response to Minister Caddle's query in relation to the practice of community development, well, I would have to start first by, just emphasizing that we had a number of centers which were scheduled for repairs, or which are still scheduled for repairs. Indeed, the practice of community development is that we go into the communities, we identify the needs of those communities, and then we treat or we have that particular intervention. What I have instructed the staff, we had a staff meeting, this would have been last week, and this is really the emphasis now, because we have quite a number of the centers which we fixed, and therefore the focus now at this point in time is to ensure that the officers, they are going into the communities, and we are going to provide those needs assessments, and based on the needs assessments, then we would plan the particular intervention. And in the past, when I was a community development officer, and I know the practice of seeking facilities other than community centers. Like, for instance, we had a program in St. Thomas, and we are well aware that we don't have a facility there in St. Thomas, but we have a pavilion, and limited as the space was, we carried out community interventions in that particular location. So what I have tasked the staff with now is that we need to get back to the practice of community development as we knew it in the past. And certainly, when I started acting as Chief Community Development Officer, and forgive me, Chair, if I did not introduce myself at the beginning of my discourse, my name is Yolande Skeet. I am the Acting Chief Community Development Officer. And I commenced acting in 2022. And certainly what I would have found, as I started by saying, it was a dearth of community interventions. And the first task was really to fix those community centers which were out of operations, and to ensure then we have space, rather than seeking then to either have to go into a location where we sometimes have to go into a school. It means then seeking permission. The ideal situation for us would be to have a community center where we can carry out our community interventions. But certainly, Minister Caddle, as I started in the beginning of my discourse by emphasizing, the community development officers, they are tasked with going back into the communities and mobilizing those communities. When in 2022, some of the officers were engaged in non-social work activities. So therefore, it meant then a matter of, having a look at the human resources we have in the department and ensuring that those were deployed as was necessary. So my commitment is to ensure that coming out with the commencement of the new financial year, all of the officers, including myself as the Chief Community Development Officer, because I believe you should lead from the front, we are going into those communities where we had a dearth of activities for quite a number of years. And certainly, we are going to ensure that we have gone back to the practice of community development.
Thank you, Minister, and Chief. At least you'll be happy to know that you'll have 2 brand new pavilions, newly refurbished pavilions, one at Gully Hill and one at Valerie, to use for your activities. But we look forward to that engagement to have community events that help build social capital in communities, going again, in particular, in areas in St. Michael where we have high populations, dense populations, people in need of recreation and other kinds of activities. My final question has to do with the role of the ministry in understanding its impact, which I know, Minister, can be difficult in the work that the ministry is engaged in. Certainly when a ministry executes a range of programs investing in young people, as you have outlined when you addressed us on Friday, attribution is difficult. In development, when we talk about attribution, we mean, can we honestly say that a particular change was caused because of the programs that we've run or the intervention that we've made? But, Minister, you have to be able to do that to some degree. You have to be able to satisfy us that the investments that are being made in young people, whether it's Youth Entrepreneurship Scheme, or the Building Blocks Legacy Program, or the program that your liaison, Mrs. Stevens, is doing with the young people to start businesses, whether they are having the impact, but particularly the impact on youth unemployment that we want to see. So my question is this: you have a sports policy, you have an emerging youth policy, emerging if not complete youth policy. You have a range of programs. You mentioned a tracer study, but I wanted to hear a bit from you on how are you sure, or how do you know, or how do you consider the impact that these various interventions are having on young people's access to income and some of the other things that you're targeting through your programs? What does success look like, and how do you know whether you're having this impact?
Thank you, Minister. Let me speak particularly right now about Project Dawn, and you ask about the impact. Project Dawn would have seen, since June last year, I believe that is when it was reconstituted, about 17 businesses started from those individuals who lie on the blocks across this country. So we use that as a gauge in terms of the impact of Project Dawn. The opening statements from the leader of the opposition spoke about vetting. And I did my research, and yes, in a sense, the ministry engaged in vetting, and I will speak to it now. A number of our young people are vetting at the Samuel Jackman Prescott Polytechnic. They're vetting at the Barbados Community College. They're vetting at Vocational Training Board. And all of the DJs are tutors at those particular locations. But you spoke and you asked particularly about work. We have just expanded, Minister, the role of YES in terms of providing satellite locations for those persons who want to be self-employed. In my initial opening on Friday, I would have indicated they would have touched, for this financial year, 400 individuals who would have sourced training under the Youth Entrepreneurship Scheme. We have made attempts to ensure that all of our vocational programs now are certified for two reasons. One, if persons are interested in the same self-employment, or if they're looking for entry-level qualifications to different areas of work, then now that is now par for the course in relation to our programs. In addition to that, we have youth officers who provide tracking service to ensure that those persons who come out of the program are using the skill sets that they would have acquired as a result of being engaged. So my simple answer to you is yes. We have evidence to suggest that persons who source training from the ministry are looking to get gainfully employed, or they're starting their own businesses. So yes, that is the short answer, that we are seeing the results as a result of our training programs.
Thank you, Minister. Chair, that brings me to the end of my questions. I just want to close by saying, Minister, and to the departments that make up this ministry, that you may not have the largest budget in these estimates, but these interventions and the responsibility of this ministry is tremendous. And, you know, we always say not everything is tax and spend. A lot of this work is moral and strategic leadership that this ministry has to engage in, to be able to demonstrate to young people and communities that we care about them, that we see them, that we feel them, that we hear them, that we are listening. And I just encourage this ministry to continue to do that. And where you feel, Minister, honestly, that you are not getting it right, because we don't always get it right, to commit to improving, because the price of not doing so is too great. Minister, Chair, I thank you.